Hey y'all, this is Sarah from The Sarah Carter Show. Thanks for listening to 3 Martini Lunch. What happens when we die? From Angel Studios, the force behind Sound of Freedom and The Chosen, comes an unprecedented deep dive into the phenomena of near-death experiences in the new movie, After Death. After Death makes a courageous venture into a hotly debated, mysterious subject by comparing near-death experience with cutting-edge scientific knowledge. Hear from experts in the fields of science, philosophy, and medicine, as well as first-hand experiences of people who have lived through death as they paint a fascinating picture of life in the next realm. This groundbreaking project responds to the soul's innate desire to find meaning in life and solace in the future. Come see it for yourself or pay it forward by providing a free ticket for others to see the film. Leave your preconceptions at the door and prepare for a never-before-seen glimpse into what the next life could entail in After Death, opening October 27th. Get your tickets today or pay it forward at angel.com/3martini-lunch. That's angel.com/3martini-lunch. After Death, the end is only the beginning. Rated PG-13.
Welcome to the 3 Martini Lunch. Grab a stool next to Greg Corombos of Radio America and Jim Garrity of National Review. 3 Martinis coming up.
Very glad you're with us for the Thursday edition of the 3 Martini Lunch. As you know, Jim Garrity is out this week. He's actually over in Taiwan. And once again, I will implore you to read the Morning Jolt so you can understand what he's reporting on there and what he's seeing and how it all plays into the larger question of China and Taiwan and our national security. Here once again in Jim's place today is Scott Bertram. He is the director of the Hillsdale College Podcast Network, host of the Radio Free Hillsdale Hour, general manager of WRFH Radio Free Hillsdale 101.7 FM at Hillsdale College, where he also lectures in journalism. And Scott is the co-host of Wasn't That Special? 50 Years of Saturday Night Live. You can find out more and subscribe at wasn'tthatspecial.com. We do have 3 martinis today, good, bad, and crazy, but a couple of critical notes up top, Scott. We just don't know a ton yet about the horrific mass shooting in Maine last night. We did get a press conference this morning, which did reduce the death toll and substantially reduce the number of injured, which is good news, but the overall number of dead and injured is absolutely horrific. And so many families in Lewiston, Maine are torn apart here. 18 dead officially, 13 injured. And as far as we know, the alleged killer is still on the loose. And so that could obviously change by the time folks hear this. But as all this plays out, and we had dueling accounts of different people with this shooter's name last night, Scott. So it was the fog of war kind of a thing. But it appears now that we do have a certain person in mind, and that this person had an extensive military career, but had also spent time very recently forcibly institutionalized for mental illness. And so a lot is going to be discussed here, but just figured it was probably better to mention it, obviously, because it's an event that's shocking the conscience of the nation. But until we know more concrete details, it's probably not responsible to dig too deep into this yet.
Agreed. We know what we know, at least as of this taping. By the time it's released, we'll probably know more. But in terms of any wide sweeping statements or any of those things, it's best not to say anything for a while, because we're not going to know a whole lot for a while. So obviously it's a complete tragedy. You think about the size of that town, which is, I looked it up last night, like 32,000. And, I live in a very, very small community, but there's a town 45 minutes away, about that same size population. And you think about how that city would react to something like this, just emergency personnel, and how everyone is going to know someone who's affected by it. And it's a true tragedy, as all these are. But yes, we will hear more, we will learn more. And until we do, it's best likely not to say much at all.
Yes. Well, let's hope the law enforcement officials are successful in their pursuit today. And knowing that it was in 3 different locations, last we heard, is also extraordinarily concerning. The other note, which seems significant, is that we actually do have a Speaker of the House. We've been speculating about it for the past couple of days, Mike Johnson of Louisiana.
Somebody got 217. How about that?
How about that? He didn't lose any Republicans, which is incredible at this point, given the tensions within the conference. But Louisiana now has the speaker and the majority leader, so bayou power in the House of Representatives on the GOP side. The Democrats, obviously, ready for whoever won with their statement from the Biden-Harris campaign of the takeover of the U.S. House by extreme MAGA is complete. And Scott, I have to think that it's kind of like those stop blank signs when Trump was nominating Brett Kavanaugh, and they didn't know who the nominee would be yet. But whoever it is, we gotta demonize this person. But he opposes same-sex marriage, so that makes him MAGA extreme, even though Donald Trump supports same-sex marriage. And he claims he wants regular order on the spending bills. And given what we're going to talk about in our third martini today, that would be welcome.
Republicans could have nominated Liz Cheney, and the attacks would have sounded the same. It's just the way things go.
Indeed. All right, well, let's talk about our good martini here, and that comes to us from a number of states, but this one comes to us specifically from the Quad Cities, right along the Mississippi River of Illinois and Iowa. WQAD, ABC Channel 8 there, and Iowa features prominently in this story because it's one of the states that has gone to school choice in a way that gives families not only the choice to send their kids to alternative schools from the public schools, but to allow them to take their money with them. In other words, the money that would be spent on their student in public schools, that could go to a private school, a religious school, in some cases even homeschool. So it's very popular is the point of the article, especially in Arizona and Iowa, but it's also making waves in Florida and Ohio. And there are many other states that have done this, but the results are still in the works. But, shockingly, Scott, parents want options when it comes to their kid. If their kid's in a school that's not getting the job done, or it's just not the right fit for the way their student learns, or whatever the situation is, parents ought to have options. And when they're given that options and the money that would have been spent on their kid anyway, turns out they like that. Big shock.
I've been talking about these issues on choice, school choice, for years and years, as long as I've been hosting radio shows, which at this point is well more than a decade. And certainly since COVID, we've seen an uptick in parents who see what's going on in those schools and want these choices. And years ago, it made more sense, although we're kind of more locked in these days. But I would say, look, we demand choice in everything. We demand choice in, the kind of cell phone we have and which carrier we have. And there's 7 options. We want to choose what's best for us. Except in schools, where somehow we accept the fact that the zip code, the block that we live on, determines what school your child attends. And to me, it's nonsensical. And it's nonsensical to a lot of parents out there as well. This is a movement that's been spreading, even in deep blue states. Just yesterday, well, it's been happening over the past couple of days, but in Illinois, they've had a tax credit scholarship program which was set to sunset. Democrats made sure it was set to sunset when they initially approved it. It was coming up for renewal. And it is such an issue that crosses demographic lines, class lines. Across the state, it's a 56-19 issue. 56% approved, 19% disapproved. In the city of Chicago, which is not MAGA country, as we talked about yesterday. This is an issue that doesn't change. It is also in the city of Chicago like a 56-18 issue. People support it. And even the deep blue, far left governor of Illinois, J.B. Pritzker, has said he will sign an extension of the tax credit scholarship program in Illinois. So it's an issue that is effective and parents love and voters support. And the opponents don't have great arguments. The story you referred to, the AP story, the lead critique in this story is by Josh Cowan, who's an anti-school choice guy from Michigan State University. He's quoted in a lot of these stories. But his argument is this, quote, "It busts the budget because it's taking on as a public expense what's previously been a private cost." Now think about that, Greg. Taking on a public expense what previously has been a private cost. Well, every taxpayer pays for schools. Some parents choose to pay more, to pay extra to put their children in private schools. What's happened is the public schools have glommed on that money that's already been used and subsumed it into their budgets, right? And so this is just taking the money that's supposed to go to the student, to travel with the student, and allow it to, in most of these cases in various states. To say that it's a public expense taking out what's been a private cost. It's a private cost because parents choose to pay double, essentially. They pay taxes to fund the schools, to fund each student in those schools, and then choose to pay more than that, double that, to send their students somewhere else. So I don't understand that being an effective argument against programs like this.
No, that's very well said. And yes, the public schools get money based on the number of pupils they have. So if your kid's not there, it still stays in the system, though, through whatever tax system they're collecting the money from, usually property taxes, which I have an intense hatred of because it's not only regressive, but it's just unfair. If you've bought something, you shouldn't have to keep paying taxes on it. But nonetheless, giving parents that option, freeing up their money, really, to pay for their kids' education just makes sense. And like you said, it cuts across all party lines, ideological lines. People love their kids and they want them to have the best opportunities. It really is that simple. So we've had a lot of progress this year after the midterm elections in some of these states with new governors and lopsided majorities in some of these states, but hopefully it's recognized in other places as well. And the fact that it's really popular in Chicago means the Democrats, if you really wanted to, you could actually win a lot of friends that way. But they can't do that because they're beholden to the unions, which after the past few years, nobody should be beholden to. All right, on to our great sponsor for the day, and that is 4 Patriots, makers of so many fine products, including the best-selling survival food kits. Like, you just don't know when your power is going to go out, and you just can't get to the store. Maybe there's a supply issue like there was during the pandemic. Who knows what's around the corner given all the upheaval we're seeing in the world right now. But these best-selling survival food kits are delicious, first of all. Also, they're designed to last for 25 years. They come with real meat and real vegetables, which is obviously very nice and important. They're perfect for taking along on camping trips or picnics. It's extremely portable. They're also good, of course, in emergency if the power is out. All you really need is to boil water over a fire, simmer and serve. Enjoy hot meals and stay safe in a crisis. So visit 4patriots.com/martini to see this week's discounts and deals before they are gone, and to get free shipping on orders over $97. Save more and get peace of mind now by going to the number 4patriots.com/martini. That's the number 4patriots.com/martini. All right, Scott, on to our very, very bad martini now here. And this is the latest conglomeration of anti-Semitism playing out on college campuses. This is just from yesterday. These stories at least emerging. Some of them originated, I guess, a little bit earlier. But much of this playing out on the West Coast, starting with UC Berkeley. Big shock. It's the faculty of the school's Ethnic Studies Faculty Council, which it calls itself a diverse statewide body that represents over 300 faculties system-wide. And they are furious that the UC system has used the word that the AP and the VOA, like we said yesterday, won't use, and that's terrorism. They say it's deeply distressing that the University of California and other higher education institutions, administrative statements in the last week and a half that irresponsibly wield charges of terrorism and unprovoked aggression have contributed to a climate that has made Palestinian students and community members unsafe. And as we explained yesterday, there's really no other way to describe what Hamas did in Israel. Usually Cal and Stanford, very much at odds, especially on the athletic level, but no, not this time, sadly. There, Stanford Palestinian activists have released their list of demands, which includes full round trip covered by the university upon the signing of a ceasefire for students to visit their family and friends and grieve properly, and also Stanford to establish an investigative committee to correct the directives, faculty, and research initiatives contributing to the subjugation of the Palestinian people. But let's move east to Northwetern University, where alum Guy Benson, famously of Fox News, has been very active in calling out his alma mater, but he flags this one as well from a professor who put out there, "Thank you to a student for bringing the student walk-off to my attention. I understand this interferes with class time, but I want to support the protest against injustice. Whoever wishes to participate. Had it been a class I was leading, I would have canceled class and joined y'all. However, I also want to respect the time and energy of the community partner guest lecturers that are coming into town." So class is still happening. She gives them a ton of different ways to make up for it in their class participation credits, even though they're not going to be there. She says, additionally, I welcome information about additional demonstrations and protests so that I can physically stand in solidarity with students against Israeli oppression and apartheid in support of good trouble, she says. Her name is Kira Lenneman. And again, she's assistant professor at Northwestern University. Back over on the left coast, we've got Jason Rance, conservative talk show host at KTTH Radio, found a protest on the campus of the University of Washington. And just listen here to how Israel and the pro-Israel demonstrators are referred to.
We know that sometimes there are Zionist, pro-Israel counter-protests at these actions. And if you see them, you don't have to engage with them. We're doing our best to de-escalate them, to move them away. We don't want Israel to exist. We don't want these Zionist counter-protesters to exist. We can't control that. What we can control is ourselves. We can choose to focus on our demands today. We want UW to cut ties with weapons companies, UW to condemn the attacks against Palestinian students, UW to cut ties with Israel, and to end the siege on Gaza now.
I didn't realize UW was in charge of the siege on Gaza now, but nonetheless, they don't want Israel to exist, so that lays it out pretty thoroughly. And finally, Scott, at Cooper Union, New York City, Jewish students barricaded in the library, locked in by security to protect them because a pro-Hamas rally outside found out that they were in the library, came inside the building, banging on the doors, screaming at them. Campus police never showed up because they would have been outnumbered. And eventually, finally, after a long wait, the NYPD apparently showed up. Normally, they aren't expected to be on campus, but we talked about this with Inez a couple of days ago. It's just brazen, and very few people are willing to stand up and confront them, which means that they're only going to get more aggressive, probably.
Is that it? Is that all you got? This reminds me of, describing the George Floyd riots as being mostly peaceful. These are mostly not Nazis. It's just a few. But we know by looking at these small samples that that's not the case. It's not surprising that the sentiment exists. I was talking to someone yesterday. It's not surprising that the sentiment exists at college campuses and elsewhere. What is surprising is it is so obviously explicit, and they feel so they feel so willing to do it without any consequences or reprisal for saying these things out loud. The quiet parts out loud. We don't want Israel to exist. We don't want Zionists to exist. Saying that out loud and not believing there will be any consequences for actions is a learned skill. They have done things like this in the past and know that no one will come and tell them to stop. They know no one will come and tell them there will be consequences, you will be punished. None of that. They believe they can say what they want, do what they want, and that's that. Greg, they're big babies. They're just big babies, meaning they believe the world revolves around them. And they should get what they want. And unfortunately, too many college campuses are being run like daycare centers. And too many administrators treat them like babies. And, if they whine, they get what they want. If they get what they want, they're not satisfied. They only want more. This is what's happening in places all across the country. And we're seeing it play out right in front of us. And I imagine, my friend Christian Schneider, who I co-host the SNL podcast with, wasn't that special, 50 years of SNL, has a piece up at National Review today about, who thought all this anti-Israel sentiment existed? Well, conservatives did. We've been talking about it, writing about it, showing videos, pointing things out for years and years, and nobody in the mainstream media and nobody on the left cared whatsoever. And now it's a big surprise. Like Jake Tapper, just after the terrorist attack 3 weeks ago, went on CNN and said, man, this is eye-opening. All this anti-Israel, anti-Jew, anti-Semitic stuff on the left, my goodness. Pay attention. Pay attention. And if nothing else, Greg, this should be the end of DEI everywhere, because none of the tenets of DEI that people talked about these past whatever years actually were true or made any difference or people believed in any of it. Safe spaces and don't say things that might harm someone, and how does that person feel and how are you making them feel? We don't want Israel to exist. We don't want Zionists to exist. That Cooper Union footage that we all saw yesterday, people banging on the doors and the Jewish students having to escape via tunnels. DEI is dead, and no one should give it any credence whatsoever in the future.
Yeah, extremely well said. And like Inez said the other day, they look at this issue the same way BLM, and they're part and parcel of the same movement, looks at the situation in this country. There's an oppressed class and there's an oppressor class, and any means are acceptable. Resistance is justified, as they say, to get what they want in terms of settling the score. And it's frightening, and if people don't stand up to it, it's going to be brutal. And I don't get the sense that most college administrators are going to do it. They find themselves in an awkward position now because the beast that they created is now going further than they would have liked, and now they can't stop it. So I'm guessing there haven't been radical, violent, loud, day-long protests at Hillsdale over this, or probably much else.
Has not. And, it's particularly bad at Northwestern. And Guy Benson's been pointing out a lot of this, and you read part of the teacher's note, the professor's note at Northwestern. And Northwestern, has a university in Qatar, and there's so much funding tied up in this that administrators, they're so paper mache, right? They don't want to offend anyone. They don't want to get on anyone's bad side. Students might say this if we come out and call them terrorists, and we might be, our campus in Qatar might be harmed if we say this. And so they are not able to be the strong leaders that institutions need at times like this. And it's going to be harmful to them, but they don't realize it yet, but it will be, and it will be very soon.
No, absolutely right, because eventually you just lose total control, which they're on the verge of doing. Well said.
Hey, y'all, this is Sarah from The Sarah Carter Show. Thanks for listening to 3 Martini Lunch. We all have a heartfelt reason to support our blood pressure. In fact, more than half the U.S. population would benefit from blood pressure support. Superbeets Heart Chews are an easy and convenient way to support healthy blood pressure and promote heart-healthy energy. Paired with a healthy lifestyle, the antioxidants in Superbeets are clinically shown to be nearly 2 times more effective at promoting normal blood pressure than a healthy lifestyle alone. And believe me, I know, because I'm traveling all over the country covering stories, and frankly, sometimes all over the world. And it's so easy. I just keep my Superbeets in my handbag, in my pocket, wherever, and I've got amazing energy. And guess what? They taste really good. So supporting healthy blood pressure comes with a bonus. Superbeets Heart Chews support healthy circulation. So you not only get blood pressure support, you also get a productive, heart-healthy energy without the crash. Double your potential with Superbeet Heart Chews. Get a free 30-day supply of Superbeet Heart Chews and 15% off your first order by going to getsuperbeets.com and using promo code Sarah. That's S-A-R-A. GetSuperBeets.com, code Sarah to get 15% off your first order. Getsuperbeets.com, promo code Sarah.
All right, Scott, on to our crazy martini now, and I wish we had a fun one, but it's not fun. It's the debt. So the official debt for fiscal year 2023, which just ended at the end of September, $1.7 trillion, the largest non-COVID deficit in American history, grew 23% in a single year. And $879 billion of that $1.7 trillion, so pretty close to half, was just to service the federal debt, paying the interest on the debt thanks to the rise in interest rates. And as E.J. Antoni of the Heritage Foundation writes in Fox Business, this is going to explode much worse than it already has. And the reason for that is, first of all, this deficit would have been $300 billion worse had the Supreme Court not blocked Biden's student loan forgiveness. In other words, foisting it back onto the taxpayers. But also because a lot of the debt that we've incurred in the past was at a pretty low interest rate. But instead of paying it off, we end up taking out more debt to pay off the old debt, and the new debt has much higher interest rates. So we're going to be north of $1 trillion just in interest soon. And of course, the Democrats are going to want to skyrocket taxes if they even care about the size of the deficit. That would be their response to it. They're certainly not going to be wanting what Mike Johnson and House Republicans are likely to be pushing here in terms of more fiscal restraint. So we're going to get a lot more red ink, and we're going to get a lot more huge deficits, which is going to lead to even more loans at really bad interest rates to pay it off. So it's kind of a death spiral, as Antoni puts it.
Much like people being surprised by anti-Semitism on the left running rampant, no one should be surprised in the same way that these increased interest rates are running, rampant and causing havoc with the debt. This has been warned about for, I don't know how long, a decade? I have talked to people about the debt and deficit, and something that always comes up is interest rates. We had very low interest rates for a very long time. And back then, we were saying, look, if interest rates spike for whatever reason, and the rates we pay to service our debt increase, it's going to blow a massive hole in the federal budget. Well, that time is now. And while interest rates are higher, they're not as high as they could go. We've seen higher interest rates in the past. And, well, that would be an even bigger problem. So this should not be a surprise to anyone. I'm talking tomorrow on a show I'm guest hosting. Sorry, I'm cheating on you, Greg. With Dominic Pino at National Review. And he wrote a piece in the most recent print edition of NR, which I'm sure is online as well, the mother of all fiscal cliffs. And I didn't know about this. That's why I'm going to talk to Dominic about it tomorrow. A fiscal cliff coming in 2025, and people are not worried enough, he argues. I don't want to get into detailed details. It's in the piece, but we have about $5 trillion in new debt expected to hit in 2025. There are some taxpayer provisions of the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act that expire. There's some healthcare subsidies that are expiring around the same time. There's all this stuff that is happening at the same time. And there's a huge cliff coming. And I bet you, and I bet most of your our listeners who have not read this Dominic Pino piece don't know anything about it. But it's coming in 2025. It's another cliff. And we're dealing with numbers that are so big. I can't recall who was, I don't know if it was Keynes. I can't recall. Someone said, once you get past $1 billion or so, people don't understand any of it. Like it's just fictional. It means nothing to them. We talk about $4 trillion, $5 trillion, $6 trillion. What does that mean to the average person? Like they can't fathom. You and I can't fathom that amount of money.
No.
And I literally laughed in a bad way, right? President Biden comes out I think it was last week, and says we need $100 billion more for Ukraine and Israel aid, right? We need more for aid packages. And like, what's $100 billion? It's like fake, phony, it's monopoly money. We're this much in the hole in terms of a yearly deficit. We're this much in the hole in terms of in terms of accumulated debt. The budget for this year is X trillion dollars. What's $100 billion? It's a rounding error. So if you say yes, what does it matter? If you say no, it's a drop in the bucket. I mean, clearly you should say no, but it's such a small part. Like $100 billion is an enormous amount of money. But in the grand scheme of things, it's nothing compared to fiscal problems that we have in D.C. It's just a weird, odd situation.
It's maddening. And what's even more maddening is that both sides demagogue it. Republicans have no strong ground to stand on here because every time they've controlled everything, which would be, right around the middle of the George W. Bush administration, they spent money like drunken sailors. Bridge to nowhere rings a bell. And then the Democrats, like Barack Obama, said that kind of spending is unpatriotic. And then he ran up the debt like crazy. And then Trump came into office and flat out said, I'm not going to worry about any of this stuff. We're not going to make a big deal about cutting spending. I'm not touching entitlements. And then, of course, COVID happened, and they throw a few $1 trillion in emergency spending in there. And then Biden takes $2 trillion more with the COVID relief bill and the Joe Manchin version of Build Back Better. And he just wants more and more and more. So both sides demagogue it when the other side has power. And then once they have the power, they don't care, and they say it doesn't matter that much. So it matters to us because just paying the interest on the debt is going to require an insane amount of spending to keep up with the entitlements that are crumbling all around us. And so if you thought they were on the verge of collapsing way too soon already, might be accelerating things. I don't know, but not good.
What helps is a really well-functioning economy that draws more money into the Treasury. But then the issue is you just spend that money too. right? That's the other thing to think about. And it's not a unique angle or insight, I suppose. But even if you have a balanced budget, Greg, what does that mean? That means simply you're not spending more than you take in. Well, you still have $33 trillion in debt to deal with at some point. So even getting to a balanced budget isn't enough to tackle the debt issue, and we're nowhere close to a balanced budget.
Yeah, and nobody even pretends that we can have one anymore. I mean, states are doing it because they have to. It's in their constitutions. I remember in the mid-'90s, we came one vote away in the U.S. Senate from sending a federal balanced budget amendment to the Constitution to the states, and given that most of them have to deal with it, a balanced budget, I think it probably would have passed. But one vote short has led to a lot of problems over time. And, this administration likes to pretend like it did something amazing to bring the increase in inflation down from where it was a year or two ago. It's all because of interest rates. The Fed tried to hold its powder dry because they knew it would happen to the interest payments on the debt. But just the spending binge from late Trump and throughout the Biden administration left it with no choice. It had to, or inflation would have gone completely through the roof. So we're seeing what looks like decent GDP numbers right now. And it's obviously, better than some people expected. But it's largely because we have to spend a lot more on stuff. So it looks like the economy is probably doing better than it is. But anyway, I could talk about this all day. I'm sure you could too, Scott. It's just so maddening when every American family has to deal with the checkbook, has to balance the budget, has to make ends meet. And then the people we send to be our voice in Washington couldn't care less about it. And then we get stuck with the bill.
But the good thing about that bill is no tipping required, at least, right? I mean, you don't have to send your local congressman a little extra for the effort. It's just flat.
That's exactly right. Well, and by the way, Jamal Bowman has pled guilty to his fire alarm incident, misdemeanor officially. Some saying that, that sort of disruption of official business on Capitol Hill carries a multi-year prison sentence, given other recent events up there. I don't know exactly how we ought to quantify it, but you could argue it's a slap on the wrist. But especially since it appeared that he wanted the Senate Democratic bill to be the one that got sent to the House instead of vice versa. But anyway, he says it's going to go away soon, within a few months, once he pays his fine and all the rest of the rigmarole. So I don't know what you think about that, but that seemed like a big deal a month ago. Now we got a lot bigger problems on our plate.
Right. It was a big deal on Saturday when it happened. By Monday, It was nothing. That's our news cycle these days. If you don't care about it in 3 hours, something else will come along. Indeed. Well, Scott, we've churned through some heavy subjects this week, so thank you for 3 different days of that, and we look forward to having you back sometime soon. My pleasure, Greg. Appreciate you having me. Absolutely. Scott Bertram is the director of the Hillsdale College Podcast Network, host of the Radio Free Hillsdale Hour, general manager of WRFH, Radio Free Hillsdale, 101.7 FM on the campus of Hillsdale College, where he lectures in journalism. He is also the co-host of Wasn't That Special? 50 Years of Saturday Night Live, which you can learn more about and subscribe to at wasn'tthatspecial.com. That show is funnier than this one, by the way, just to be clear. The subject matter is lighter, usually. We like to have a lot of laughs on this show, and we do, but man, the topics have been heavy lately. But anyway, I'm Greg Corombos of Radio America. Thanks for listening. Please subscribe if you don't already. Tell some friends to join you. We'd love to have them listening. Thanks also for your 5-star ratings and your kind reviews. Please keep those coming. Get us on your home devices. All you have to say is play 3 Martini Lunch Podcast. Follow us all on Twitter. He's at Scott Bertram. Jim is at Jim Garrity. I am at Dateline_DC. Have a great Thursday and join us again on Friday for the next 3 Martini Lunch.